This is Tim Bryce with my column titled, Who are the Domestic Terrorists? The term terrorist came into vogue during the 1970s as we experienced a spike in airline skyjackings. This, of course, led to the tightening of security measures at airports. I'm old enough to remember life before this, back when you just showed up at the airport, walked on the plane, and handed your ticket to the stewardess. Yeah, it was that easy, and flying was fun. Not anymore. TSA has seen to that. Since then, use of the word terrorist became associated with atrocities in the Middle East, such as kidnappings, murders, bombings, extortion, and executions, such as cutting off heads. In this sense, terrorism has been around for hundreds of years, but more recently it came to the forefront in the latter part of the 20th century and is considered barbarous. Please understand the purpose of terrorism, to wit, to use unlawful force or violence to intimidate people for political or social gain. It is a technique used to get one's way, particularly if the opposition is too large to fight one-on-one. Consequently, the terrorist turns to clandestine tactics to intimidate others. Today we're hearing a lot about domestic terrorists, meaning a group of people in this country who are trying to use savage methods to get their way. Even President Biden, in his inaugural address, alluded to such a phenomenon, saying, quote, "And now, a rise in political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism that we must confront and we will defeat," end quote. Other prominent Democrats have been repeating this mantra as well, including Representative Nancy Pelosi and Senator Chuck Schumer. Much of this is designed to convict President Donald Trump after impeachment, but it goes after his supporters as well. Recently, a group of Senate Democrats introduced a resolution to review domestic terrorist threats by extremist groups. It has even been suggested that the Republican Party be placed on such a domestic terrorist watch list. Again, this is designed more to intimidate Trump supporters than anything else. Make no mistake, though, their constant references to white supremacist groups is a swipe at Republicans and not the KKK. These same Democrats have remained stone silent on the violent actions of groups such as Antifa and Black Lives Matter, who actively participated in the 2020 Summer of Hate, where buildings were invaded, burned, looted, and local citizens viciously attacked. They were certainly not peaceful protesters. This means domestic terrorism has two different interpretations depending on the political party you embrace. The use of the expression white supremacy is a clever attempt to label all Republicans as racist and should be punished accordingly, including the termination of their free speech rights. The Democrats' loathsome characterization of Trump supporters is reminiscent of Hitler's persecution of the Jews as evil parasites feeding on the Aryan master race. Yet the Democrats seem to have no problem threatening Republicans. We all remember Representative Maxine Waters in 2018 saying, quote, "Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up, and if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd, and you push back on them," end quote. This is much more threatening than anything spoken by President Trump at the Stop the Steal protest of January 6th. Yet while the Democrats claim Waters was only kidding, they are hell-bent on impeaching the former president. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has even gone so far as to brand congressional Republicans as white supremacists, saying, quote, "This term," meaning 2021, "there are legitimate white supremacist sympathizers that sit at the heart and at the core of the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives," end quote. By doing so, AOC is declaring them racist and as such unfit to serve in Congress. This, of course, is fallacious. I just wish AOC was aware of her own party's role in the preservation of slavery, the Civil War, the KKK, and Jim Crow laws. She obviously doesn't remember the stand in the schoolhouse door incident in the 1960s by Alabama Governor George Wallace, a prominent Southern Democrat. All of this is in sharp contrast to the Republicans who promoted freedom and Reconstruction, which is all conveniently forgotten. AOC's sense of history is embarrassing. Let us also understand this recent push to declare groups of people as domestic terrorists. By doing so, this means they can be treated like any other terrorist group and subject to prosecution under the Patriot Act, which is certainly not a misdemeanor. It also means the federal government can spy on you, as well as search and seize your belongings without a subpoena. So the question remains, who are the domestic terrorists? Well, that depends on your political persuasion and the violence committed. If you are a Democrat, you point at your political opponents, the Republicans, for whom you brand as white supremacists, a la identity politics. If you are a Republican, you point at those vandalizing and creating mayhem in our cities, such as Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and those sponsoring these groups. So to be correctly labeled a terrorist, you have to ask which side commits true violence and for what purpose, specifically intimidation. If it doesn't pass this simple acid test, they are not terrorists, but political pawns instead. All of this is aimed at changing our perspective and a part of a larger picture of deprogramming the citizens of this country. Friends, keep the faith. This is Tim Bryce in Palm Harbor, Florida. Follow me on the internet at timbryce.com.